Hi, everyone. Hi, Deirdre.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hi, everyone.
So here we are, first DM of 2023. I'm finally saying 2023, not 2022. And great to be here. Great to see you. I'm really, really excited about today's show and our guest who we'll be bringing on in a couple minutes.
Yes, and I have been just dying to ask you this, Martin. Are you going with the flow in 2023 or are you growing with the flow?
Maybe a little of both. I'm trying to focus more, but it's hard with all the distractions. And sometimes, you know, life gets in the way too. You have all sorts of obligations. So hopefully Erin Shrimpton, our guest, will be able to talk about that. So first show of 2023, we have a lot more planned, including one that's coming up on the 23rd of February. That's show 2.
That's right. We're going to be sharing about that in a little bit. And I'm excited about this year and all the ways that we're going to chat and bring light to different topics. So this is a great way to start with the flow.
Yeah. And we just want to say, for any of you who are watching live, please let us know you're here, where you're from. If you have any questions, we'll come back to that. We would love to hear from you. So welcome. And Deirdre, do you want to introduce our guest?
Yes, absolutely. So today joining us on the DM show is Erin Shrimpton. And even though I'm just going to touch on Erin's bio, please go and check her out on LinkedIn. You can find her profile and connect with her. Erin is a chartered organizational psychologist and an expert in workplace behavior change. She is a LinkedIn learning instructor. She is a coach, and she consults with professionals, leaders, and teams to change workplace experience for the better. And I love that. So let's bring in Erin.
Great.
Hello.
Hello. How are you, Erin?
I'm really good. Thank you so much to both of you for having me. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you here.
Yeah.
You can see that we have several guests who are with us. I see Tom is there. Hi, Tom. Glenda Fordham.
Yes, who I know from Toronto.
Yes, and Diane Gomez.
Hi, Diane.
Hi, Diane.
Tatiana, a former student of mine. Hi, Tatiana. Good to see you too, Saha. So it's really great to see all of you. And Erin, you're coming from Dublin, right?
I am indeed. I'm here in Dublin, Ireland. So I'm a little bit ahead time-wise. I'm closer to the end of the day. But yeah, so I'm it's pretty cold here in Dublin. We're right bang in the middle of quite a harsh winter, but
yes, well,
we're staying toasty inside.
Us too, here in New Jersey.
So I want to get started just by asking you to tell us what flow is or what the flow state is, just so we all have an idea, because we hear about it. And how do you know? So what is it, and how do you know when you're there?
Good questions. So the flow experience, it's what psychologists call a peak experience, a peak human experience. And it was a term coined by psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. And he is one of the founders of the positive psychology movement. And it really describes the state that we are in when we are fully immersed in what we're doing. And importantly, not only are we immersed in what we're doing, but we are gleaning meaning and fulfillment from the act of doing it. And then in answer to your second question, the thing is, we might not actually be aware when we're in flow, because what happens when you are in flow, in the pure sense, is that the part of the brain that's in charge of kind of thinking, rational thought, and what we call in psychology self-referential thinking is a little bit dampened. So it's not as active anymore, which actually allows us to get into this state. So it's kind of a heightened state of consciousness. So that means that we might not actually be aware of the fact that we're in flow. So if you think about what happens, often, say, for example, if you're having a great conversation just like this one, often you might think back on it later today and think, gosh, I can't actually remember exactly what we talked about in that conversation because I was so engrossed in the conversation. You know, you'll obviously remember a high level, but you might not remember specifics. And that's because you are just so engrossed in the flow state that you weren't actually aware of yourself. It's almost like you're looking at yourself from outside.
Okay, so actually, if I say I'm in flow now, I'm not.
You're not.
Probably.
If you think too much about being in flow, you're probably not in it.
Right.
Right. And anytime you're nervous, you're probably not in it as well. And I think that with so many things going on around us, whether it's the goals that we're setting or jumping into a new year, it's less of the flow if we're thinking about it and putting pressure on ourselves.
Yeah, that's right. And I think one of the reasons and one of the ways that I like to use flow at the moment is actually as a way of kind of pushing away some of those unhelpful, overwhelming thoughts that, you know, we're all experiencing. It's been a difficult few years. Number one. Number two, we're in this mode now where there are so many distractions coming at us, both from the digital world, but also just our lives in general. As you said at the beginning, Martin, there's seemingly just so many demands constantly. And I think if you find a way to find flow, ideally, if you can, every single day, it means that you're allowing your brain some time to just focus on one thing. And not only is that obviously good for us, just to have that only focus on just one thing, but actually it allows us to access this peak experience. And it is really, the research has shown, Csikszentmihalyi's research has shown that that's associated with more positive mood. So it's really good for our well-being as well. So it's, you know, on so many levels, a great thing to try and focus on achieving.
So when you say, Erin, to focus on one thing, are you saying to not set too many goals that can't be translated into some kind of action that you're doing that feels good? So in other words, are we setting too many goals, or maybe we're not focusing enough on one or two and really diving in and getting immersed?
So Csikszentmihalyi outlines a number of conditions for accessing flow. And actually, one of them is to set goals. One of the first things that he says is make sure that you have specific goals. And once you have those specific goals, make sure that you are very granular about what they are. So we all know that goal setting is important for us because it allows us to focus. But I suppose it's a case of a bit of self-reflection and making sure that you're not setting a goal for yourself that is too far out of reach for your energy state at that time, for example. But also to make sure that the goal that you're setting, one thing that I always think about, the goal that you're setting, make sure that actually the steps along the way are going to be actions that you take that get you into the flow experience. So that's, a few years ago, I probably would have been in jobs where I'd have been going from meeting to meeting with so many, with millions of emails, and I'd get from one day to the next and realize that all I'd done all day was be in meetings and respond to emails. And so when I kind of changed my way of working a bit, I thought, I'm going to design, rather than even caring too much about what my ultimate goal is here, my big intention and my big vision for the way I work is to make sure that I have space in my everyday to access a flow experience. Because at the end of the day, that's all we have. We have our days, and we need to make sure that we're spending our days wisely and accessing that feeling of fulfillment in our day to day. And that doesn't have to be lofty. It doesn't have to be that I'm changing the world every day. It just means that I'm, in some way feeling that sense of fulfillment. And then, of course, the beautiful thing about this is that once you find ways to do that, you end up being able to achieve better goals at the end of it anyway. So kind of flip it on its head. You know, I flip the idea of goal setting on its head by thinking, okay, so how am I going to access flow? What are the goals that I want to set that allow me to access flow? And then I focus on the accessing of flow, and then hopefully the goals will come.
I like that.
That's great. I'm going to just get Daniel, hello. Shruti, thank you for saying that. Sandia, hello. Bernard Goldback said he's teaching university students also in Ireland to get in the flow with a little help from Don Norman, who talks about the idea and the design of everyday things. Thank you. And then we have a question from Mahbub, which is it okay to be on, this is a question for me about social media. You know what? Why don't we, Mahbub, why don't you, okay, you know what? I'm going to take that one just quickly. Is it okay to be on all social media platforms with one business strategy? I think that ties in with our discussion of flow. You want to be really mindful and pick and choose the ones, not only that you like being on, but that your audience is on, and where you can provide value to them. And in the same way, you want to have those attainable goals that you were talking about, Erin. I think it's a similar kind of thing with social media, because otherwise all that happens, and I can speak personally, is we get distracted by all the distractions, you know, all the pings that are coming at us, and we have to slow that down. Deborah Full saying, welcome, nice to see you. And Jaspreet, another former student. Deborah was a journalist in Canada, so good to see you.
Excellent. I just have a quick comment. Erin, you said something really interesting about moving from meeting to meeting and fielding emails in between. What I do, the way that I look at it, is that if I could get simple awareness going, sort of resetting in between, is that what you mean too? Where even if you're just breathing, it helps so much to get you back into that better feeling state so that there is a chance to move into flow. So is that what you mean? Does breathing help?
Oh, absolutely it does. And I think that those, you know, giving yourself those moments of transition between meetings, one thing I think, you know, one of the other big conditions that Mihai talks about in terms of accessing flow is focus, which isn't surprising because it's all about that state of focus. And one of the ways that I guess that I've made sure to do that through my learnings from being a bit overwhelmed with too many emails and too many meetings is, you know, obviously, unfortunately, we live in a world where there have to be emails, there have to be meetings. We're not going to eradicate those. But what you can do is batch your time. So to make sure, you know, this is one thing I encourage teams that I work with to do is, to, you know, if you have a number of meetings that you have to have during the week, can you make sure that they're all in the one day? And so that allows you to block out time in your calendar so that you're more able to access flow. Can you, if you have tasks like replying to a lot of emails or, you know, all of those pesky tasks that we all hate doing, bits of admin, I let them each week, I let them kind of bundle up a little bit. And then I might spend in one morning, I might just spend a couple of hours just getting through them all. And then, you know, that means personally, I find I'm more able to access flow and focus in the afternoon. Whereas some people might prefer to do it in the morning. And this is another really important point about it, is that everybody is different, of course. Right. And so we all have to make sure that we are reflecting on, okay, well, what are the times of the day that allow me to access flow? What are the conditions, you know, do I need to make sure that I've had my coffee and I've had enough to eat? And some people maybe even like to put on special slippers. You know, there are little rituals that people take to make sure that they can access this peak experience. So one of the really important things, obviously, is to try and get those times. We're never going to eradicate those distractions, you know, right. But to try and block time and take the control of your own time so that you have those blocks of time when you know you're more likely to access it.
Well, it's really interesting because, and I'm glad to hear you say afternoons, because it's similar with me. Afternoons, I want to do it in the morning, but there are just so many things that I want to go through. Reading, you know, various articles or stories just to keep on top of things. research, whereas I find in the afternoon it's much better. And I have to say, your newsletter, Erin, is fantastic. So for any of you who are watching, check out Erin's newsletter, because there are so many great tips and pieces of advice in there, and also fantastic cartoons. Little that you do. Are you ever going to publish those in a book or something? Because
I mean, I'd love to, but they are very kind of what's the word? Low tech. Literally means just slightly scribbling. And interestingly, I started those doodles in an attempt to find flow in my days, you know, and I also talk quite a lot about intrinsic reward and finding tasks that are intrinsically motivating, which is very aligned to the idea of flow. Because again, so intrinsic means that basically you're rewarded by doing the task itself. So if you're extrinsically motivated to do something, you're looking for a reward that's external to yourself. So it might be you give yourself a chocolate chip cookie at the end of finishing your taxes. Or obviously the obvious extrinsic reward is financial, but intrinsic, everybody needs to have tasks that they do that they're intrinsically motivated to do, because otherwise, you know, we're really ever chasing that extrinsic reward. So actually doing those little doodles and doing my newsletter has become something for me that I love to just go into the flow. And well, I don't always access the flow with it, I have to admit, you know, even though I know all the research about it, it's still elusive to me at times. But I know that by doing certain tasks that I'll be more likely to try and get to actually get into it. So those doodles are one of them. And yeah, I really enjoy doing them, and it's something a little bit different. You know, it's probably something I wouldn't have been able to do in a day job previously. So,
well, that's good. Before we get to our next question, I just want to get to a few comments. Noreen Patney, also another former student, blocks out working time and breaks, and that helps her. Ahmed, welcome. Nico says, Nico Hodel, such an important topic. Favorite book on the subject is The Rise of Superman by Stephen Kotler. Flow states are a game changer. And we're talking about getting into that state of flow. But Erin, one thing you were telling Deirdre and me beforehand was that, you know, this week wasn't great for you. You had a couple of setbacks for the last couple of weeks. Can you talk a little bit about that and how not to let that make you, get you less heartened by what you're trying to do?
Yeah, and I think this is a really important thing to talk about, especially in January, when there's so much content out there about our goals and achieving success in 2023, which is all really important, and that's brilliant. Yes, I was telling you both that I had COVID over Christmas and then ended up having a secondary chest infection with it, which led me to just be out of action for a few weeks. And, you know, it's so frustrating when you love getting into the flow experience and you really, you know, I've reached a point, I'm really fortunate that I've reached a point in my career that I really genuinely love my work. I glean intrinsic value from it. I would probably do my work even if I didn't get paid for it, which I probably shouldn't say out loud. So I'm really fortunate that I'm in that position. But when you're not well, or you've had some sort of a setback, something's happened, you know, I have 2 small children. There's a lot of viruses going around at the moment, and that is, you know, stopping us all from working when we need to work, or, you know, it's in one way or another, kind of giving us sort of derailers that we hadn't expected. So that feeling of really wanting to achieve, wanting to set goals, but actually not feeling well enough to do it, or feeling that sort of sense of burnout, is an uncomfortable one. But I think it's important, you know, and especially as a psychologist, to make sure that everybody is aware of the fact that that is totally normal. There's a lot of people in that boat. We've been through 3 years of immense disruption in our lives. So there's a lot of people who are still feeling, for example, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, who today announced she's stepping down because, you know, citing burnout, and which I thought was an incredibly brave thing to do. And actually a really important, you know, an important role model for many of us who may feel nervous to admit that we're not feeling at our best. So I think, you know, one important thing about setting goals is to remember that if your energy state isn't ready for it, it's okay not to set goals. However, so I think I said to you before the broadcast started, this year I'm thinking of February 1st is the start of my year rather than January 1st. I just wasn't really in the place to set goals and to, really hit the ground running at the beginning of January. And that's okay. Katie Milkman, who is a really brilliant researcher and behavioral scientist, she has a book called How to Change. And I highly recommend that book to anybody who wants to set goals, to know how to get better habits, to change any behavior, really. But she talks about the idea of a fresh start. Now, a fresh start is one where the research shows that, if you set yourself a fresh start, you're more likely to change a behavior and get into a new habit. And of course, January 1st is a good one to use for lots of people. However, we're not already on for January 1st to do it. So that's why, you can choose when your fresh start is.
Well, that is great. And there's one thing that I wanted to ask you. When you're taking this fresh start, you had mentioned the blocking out time to do whatever you need to do so you can get in your flow. Do you block out time for your own self-care, giving yourself some grace and space, especially when you're up against not feeling at your best?
Yes, I do. And actually one of my reflections is that I work for myself. So sometimes it can be very hard to take that break because there's always something more to be done, right? And also there's nobody else to take my work on for me. So if I don't do it, it's not getting done. So it could be really hard to say, do you know what? No, I can't do this. But at the beginning of this year, I decided actually the only way I'm going to be able to get my energy back and to achieve any of the goals and to get myself back into a place where I can access flow is to start to say no to things, even if I really want to do them. And there have been things that I've had to say no to that I've really wanted to do and that I've just postponed. And instead then to carve out time for some self-care. I'm actually, next week, I'm going to go and bring my laptop away to Spain, which is going to be a little bit warmer than it is here. And I have some deep work flow that I need to get into to do some deep work. And I'm hoping that change of scene, because sometimes I cite this in my recent newsletter. There are lots of different types of rest that we need. And sometimes rest doesn't necessarily mean going and lying down. Sometimes it just means that you need a change of scene, something more interesting, so a different mode. So I found lots of different things and different ways that I can give myself that space. But it can be so hard. It's really hard to really tune in, and especially with 2 small children and all the demands that come with that when you're working as well.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions again from viewers. One from Ahmed. And Ahmed, if you don't mind, we're going to keep that question for the next one because our guest is a social media expert. So he'll be able to really weigh in on that. So hopefully you don't mind. But Mahbub said, Erin, doesn't flow come under behavior management? If he wants to if he has an individual action plan to achieve, any recommendations on how he can change behavior?
Does he mean change behavior for people who he's managing or for yourself?
I don't know. Can you clarify that, Mahbub, and then we'll get back to you? You can just post it in the comments. That'd be great. In the meantime, what are some of your top tips that you would give us to become more productive and more focused, really?
More focused. I think be mindful about what you want to focus on, because as I said, if you're setting yourself a goal or if you're deciding that you want to work on something and then you realize that in fact the steps that you need to take to get there involves work that you have absolutely no interest in, or that is not in any way aligned with your skill set. Again, one of the things that Csikszentmihalyi says about accessing flow is to find that balance of challenge with your skill. So it has to be slightly challenging, of course, so that your brain doesn't get bored, but it also has to be aligned with your own skill set. So, you know, I think that you're setting yourself up to fail if the steps that you're taking along the way, so the day-to-day work that you're doing isn't really getting you into flow. It isn't really doing anything for you. So that's my main thing, is to always make sure that what you're doing, and of course we all have things that we're doing that we have to do that will not lead us to go into flow, that we will really not enjoy doing. That's a given. But just to make sure that the goals that you're setting for yourself involves work, and that you're designing your day to really get yourself into that flow state where you can experience meaning, because then you'll be more intrinsically motivated to continue to do it.
I'm going to add one more to what Erin said, and it's what you said before. To be productive is also to say no. Just use that powerful word, because we can't do everything.
Yeah, and that, you know, that means often you might find that once you've said no, it means that you can block time in your diary to access flow and to be more productive. So yeah, really important one. Really, really important.
Yes, and to say yes to the things that you love to do, which is really important, that choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you've actually answered Mahboob's question, because it was about how to get yourself into a state of flow. So that really figuring out what your priorities are, challenging yourself, but doing something you love. I think we have time for one last question before we have to go. And this has gone by way too quickly, Erin. Again, we'll have to get you back if that's okay at some point.
In the flow, that's why.
Yeah.
One of the things with flow is that time seems to we lose all sense of time. So you could be working on something or having a great conversation. You realize, oh my goodness, half an hour has passed and I didn't realize. So that's a sign that you've been in flow.
Yeah, I like Diane's comment. I just want to mention Diane Gomez said, no is a complete sentence. No. That's all I have to say.
So any final words of advice for how to kind of grow with the flow in 2023, Erin?
I think we have this unique opportunity now, having been through the disruption of the pandemic. And now that we are all working more remotely or more flexibly, many of us have the opportunity to work at least in a hybrid way. We have this opportunity to redesign our working days. And this is aligned with a concept in psychology called job crafting, which, again, I won't go into now, we don't have time, but it is a really fascinating concept. So if you want to look it up, it's called job crafting. Researchers Amy Rysnesky and Jane Dutton did plenty of research on it, and it's all about how we can design our jobs to align with what works best for us and to glean more meaning and engagement in our day-to-day. And so that means being able to design our jobs and design our work so that we can access things like flow. And I think we have more of an opportunity to really just take a step back from the concept of work and look at it again and think, right, we used to think of work in one way. Now it got really disrupted. Now that we are redesigning work, how can I redesign it in a way that really brings meaning and fulfillment into my day-to-day? And so that is what I would love to see happening out of all of this, rather than, there's a lot of chat at the moment about the office versus homework, the office versus working from anywhere. For me, it's more even about thinking even more broadly than that. It's all about how are we setting our working lives up so that we are all more fulfilled in our day-to-day. And I'd love to see that happening more.
It's awesome. I think you just defined growing with the flow.
Yeah.
That's it. For 2023. Fantastic.
Yeah,
we'll check in at the end of 23 and see how we got on with it.
Yeah, that's right. We'll have to do a recap to say, okay, did we achieve them or not?
Right. And it's okay if there's setbacks. That's okay.
That's actually, do you know what? That's exactly what I was going to say, Deirdre, is that one thing that I am talking and saying to clients so much at the moment is this is going to take us a long time. We're never going to get the answer on how to set our working lives up for the better overnight. We have to just experiment our way through probably through 2023. I only said to a colleague and another LinkedIn Learning instructor, actually, Gemma Lee Roberts, I said, you know, maybe in 2024 we'll know. We'll have a better idea about, but honestly, there's so much has changed in the last couple of years for all of us. It's going to take us time to work out what the best way of working for all of us is. And, you know, it's different for every organization. It's different for every individual. It's different for every team. So the best approach I would say to take to it is go into this like we're experimenting. And it's okay if there are setbacks. It's okay if there are failures. It's okay if you try and get into flow and it doesn't work. That's fine. It's just all about working out what works best for you.
That's great advice, Erin.
Yeah.
For everybody.
Thank you so much, Erin. It really great talking to you. And I'm so glad you were able to take time out of your evening for our day.
Well, I knew that this would be a flow experience, so I said yes immediately.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you to everybody who tuned in for your comments and your questions. This is a really good discussion. Hope everybody grows into their flow in 2023 or 2024, whenever it happens for you.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. So thank you.
Thank you. And we'll be back in March with a special guest. I guess we can
February.
say who it is. February. Sorry.
Yes. And March too.
Yeah. See, I'm jumping one ahead. February.
We're in the flow.
Yeah.
There you go.
Social media expert Brian Honigman. So join us then. Erin, fantastic. And thanks, everyone. Yes. We will see you next month.
Yes, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.